The Senior Rehab Project is supported by the Game Changers, a group of motivated rehab clinicians that are crushing mediocrity and advancing care for older adults. You can join this group of people and get access to the private Facebook group, the monthly meetup with article discussions, and have a say in the direction of this movement. Get off the sidelines and get involved. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com/Game Changers. Hit me!
This is a Senior Rehab Podcast, the podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults. And now your host, my grandson, Dusty Jones.
What's up, y'all? This is Dustin Jones, your host of the Senior Rehab Podcast. Today's episode is an awesome episode with the one and only Ned Overend. So to give you all some context before we jump into the interview, my favorite event, hands down, favorite event of every year is the Iron Horse Bicycle Classic. This is held in Durango, Colorado, kind of the southwest portion of Colorado, and it's a 50-mile road bike ride. From Durango, you go up and over a couple mountain passes, and then you descend for, I think, 7 miles alongside of a mountain into the town of Silverton, Colorado. It's an epic ride, just a lot of fun, and it's very, very challenging. I am very slow on a bike. I just want to try and complete the race, but every time I do it, I know way far ahead of me is Ned Overend. So Ned is an absolute living legend in the world of cycling, in particular mountain biking. He was the inaugural winner of the UCI Mountain Bike World Championships in 1990. He has won several different titles at different levels, but has a crazy list of accomplishments of what he's been able to do on two wheels. He was inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame in 1990 and the United States Bicycling Hall of Fame in 2001. In 2015, he won the USA National Fat Bike Championship. Now, to give you a little bit of perspective, Ned was born on August 20th in 1955. And in 2015, at the age of 60, he won the National Fat Bike Championship. So the amazing thing about Ned, is all the titles that he's won. That's great. But what I really care about or very intrigued about is how he's been able to perform at such a high level for such a long period of time. I can't think of any other athlete that I've ever heard of to be still competing with and oftentimes beating some of the pro riders in their mid-20s, early 30s. To give you all some perspective, if you don't really spend much time on a bike, you can think of Ned almost like if Magic Johnson or Larry Bird were still competitive in the NBA today. To give you some perspective, so Magic Johnson was a guard with the Lakers, Larry Bird with the Celtics, and they dominated the NBA kind of before Michael Jordan was around. Just imagine if they were still doing their thing today. That's how you can think about Ned. Absolute living legend. So we're going to talk with Ned, get his perspective on training, recovery, changes that he's seen throughout his career, and just aging in general. This is going to be very applicable to your patients. There's a lot of principles that you'll hear Ned talk about that we can scale or adapt to benefit our patients as well. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview, whether you're a cyclist or not, whether you care about athletics or not. This is just a really interesting conversation with a pretty incredible guy. So without further ado, Ned Overend, coming from the lovely town of Durango, Colorado. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. This is your host, Dustin Jones, and I have a very special guest today who is not a physical therapist, who is not someone in academia, who is not someone in the rehab research world. We have with us today an absolutely epic athlete in the cycling world, or just kind of the endurance sport world, Deadly Nedley. Can I call you that? I know that's kind of your nickname. That's
sure.
Good.
Yeah, that's one of them.
So anyone that has been on a mountain bike, you can attribute a lot of the popularity of that sport to this individual. Ned, is a very accomplished in the mountain bike world, but also the road cycling world. He's a hell of a runner as well. Just an all-around, athletic specimen. We're going to have him on today to talk about his career, but also just his experience with aging, what changes that he's seen. So Ned, can you give people an idea of where you live currently? Because you happen to live in what is likely my favorite town in the United States of America. Could you give them the lay of the land of Durango?
Yeah, I'm in Durango, Colorado. It's down in the southwest corner of Colorado. It's about 6,500 feet of elevation here, and a little over 20,000 people in this town. But we've got a great trail system. We got a long history of mountain bike racing promotion here, the World Championships, World Cup, National Championships, and a huge trail building group here called Trails 2000. So we've got an amazing network of trails in this town. So it's a great place for cycling.
Yeah. But people, it's pretty terrible. Don't even, worry about going. They just had a really bad fire, so I would stay away from. I'm just kidding. I just don't want to reveal the secret of Durango, because the secret's starting to get out of how special of a place it is. But it's awesome. So yeah, Ned, if you go to Durango and you hop on a bike, you're going to hear about Ned's name. I've already mentioned to you all his accomplishments, but we're wanting to talk about things that will be applicable to our work. Working with older adults in kind of that rehab setting. So Ned, my first question for you, and this actually comes from a good buddy, Mike Eisenhart. He was curious, when you started your athletic career, what were your expectations about aging as an athlete? If you were to ask that question, to the 20-something-year-old Ned.
Well, it's interesting. Back then, I started being a professional racer around 26, 27. So I came to it kind of late. I had an athletic background before that, because I ran in high school and college. And I actually did the Ironman in 1980, but I had no idea of becoming a professional at that time. And then after that, I moved to Durango and was a mountain runner. And like all runners, you get injured. And I became a cyclist when I was injured from running, and took up triathlon for a little while. And then as mountain biking started becoming popular, did some mountain bike races, did well, and then thought, well, geez, maybe I'll try and actually get sponsored at this. So I was about 26, 27 when that was happening.
Okay.
And so, at that time, you're invincible, right? You don't really even think about aging that much, Maybe as you get more into your mid 30s and stuff like that, you start to consider how much longer you'll be able to race and how motivated you are to do it. So I started having results even after I retired from mountain biking in 96 as my official job was Specialized, and I became an employee in R&D and promotions. But at that time, I was 40. I started doing the Xterra triathlons, and the first World Championships I did, I was third. Then the second, I was in second place, and then the third time I did it, I won the World Championships in Maui at Xterra. So then I was already, I think, 41, 42. So at that time, I was already saying, well, I'm just going to, push any decisions about how I feel about how aging is going to affect me, out of my mind, and just see how long I can keep this going.
So you feel like you did a great job of just kind of, staying in the moment, kind of taking it one, day by day or year by year in terms of what your expectations were.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important part of it, because a lot of people, they hit certain milestones, like they hit the age of 40 and they decide, oh, now I'm 40, my performances are going to drop off. I'm going to have to think about, racing age group or, doing something different, not training as hard or with as much volume, which you actually do need to control how much volume and training you do as you get older and you can't recover. But you shouldn't do it without first deciding what you're really capable of, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You shouldn't base it on things you hear from other people about how your performance declines with age.
Yeah. That's a good point. And that's something that we see in our work as well. Like say, tomorrow I've got a new evaluation and we kind of get this, sheet of paper that, has their demographics and kind of what their issue is. But it's very easy for me to look at that birthday, for example, and then have a lot of these assumptions that they were born, in 1930. They're probably, only going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I'm not going to be able to push them in such manner. But yeah, that can be a terrible mistake if I, base my, treatment plans based on a birthday rather than, an actual assessment, for example.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I don't know if you mentioned to the podcast world out there. I'm 62 now. Be 63 next month. So those are big milestones when you hit the big 6-0. 50 was a big milestone, I remember, but now it's 60, and then it's kind of like, just on to the next milestone, which will be 70, and that'll be a scary milestone too. It's, when you get this age, you don't think so much year to year, but it's kind of like, okay, what's that next decade? Yeah. When I hit the big 7-0, how am I going to be doing?
Well, I know I'm going to be keeping track of those Iron Horse results just to see. Yeah, just that's a big draw for me just to talk with you. Is in no other sport have I seen someone be so dominant for such a long period of time. And I'll mention this in the introduction, but the way I perceive you is as if Magic Johnson or Larry Bird were still in the NBA right now, and they were still destroying the 20-some-year-olds that were coming into the NBA. I mean, it's just something that we don't see a lot of. So I'm curious. So in terms of, let's talk about your training, your training regimen. What have been the biggest changes from, let's say, 20 years ago to kind of what you're typically doing now in terms of like a weekly training regimen?
Well, of course it changes, year to year in small increments. In some years it doesn't necessarily train at all, but over the last couple of decades, for sure, I've been much more focused on recovery, right? Your volume has to be reduced, and it used to be, more volume and more intensity, but now it's less volume, and I focus more on quality intensity. So I still get the intensity, and from everything I've read, that type of training, lower volume, more high intensity, is the best way to hold on to the biggest percentage of your VO2 max, right? Of your aerobic capacity. Yeah. So
what was yours last time you tested?
I don't know offhand. I talked about it on that video on a Velo News podcast, but there's a few different numbers, and it's literally been 10 or 15 years, I think, since it was tested. Not astronomical numbers, but the guys on the VO2 podcast, Trevor Connor and Chris Case, were saying that it was very high for a guy who, at that time, I think it was 50.
Man,
roughly. But it'd be interesting to do it again. I don't feel like I've really done a good VO2 test in kind of the right circumstance, where I'm well rested, do it on my own bike. And
yeah, that's a good point. So tangibly speaking, when you say recovery, what does that really look like for you?
Well, it's all. So I don't train with a heart rate monitor or a watt meter. So I'm strictly an intuitive trainer. So let's say that, for instance, my rides kind of center around Strava efforts and competitive group rides. So every Tuesday we have a roughly an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute group ride with, there's national caliber riders on it, whatever. And I focus on that ride as, one of the main intensity rides of the week. So the day before that, for instance, this is Monday, right? I'm actually going to take the day off. I rode pretty hard yesterday, and today I'm going to take off. I might, do a short spin, maybe ride with my wife on the bike path or something like that, so that I'm well rested for tomorrow night's group ride effort. Okay. And then after that group ride, I'll determine what kind of recovery I need based on when I go out and ride the next day, kind of how my legs feel, whether they're tight, whether, I base it like on respiration, what kind of gear I can turn over. So it's an intuitive feel, and I'll determine whether I need, how much recovery I need over the next couple of days before I could do another intense ride.
So have you always been kind of subjective about your recovery in terms of just kind of feeling it out and being intuitive, or did you go through a phase where you were more objective and trying to, leverage data? Cause I'm definitely, here kind of both sides of the camp. You have people that measure everything and they're just kind of obsessed with the numbers and almost lose touch, with really their intuition. Than other people that just go strictly by feeling. I'm just kind of curious if you've always been like that or kind of transition in and out.
Yeah, I would have more structured. I've always been self-coached, but I've always been, a voracious reader of coaching information. Whether back in the day it was ADB's book on coaching, or Joe Friel. He's had some great books. Fred Matheny's had some awesome books. And so I've read a lot about coaching information and coaching theory, but I'm not very good at structure and or following the numbers, like going on a ride and watching my heart rate. I've tried to do intervals, back in the day it was before kind of watt meters, and I've tried to do intervals based on heart rate, and to me it was just too much structure. I was better at doing free-form intervals and repeats on a given hill. And what I would do was I would kind of figure out what race I was doing 2 or 3 weeks out, and then do intervals on the types of courses or the types of hills I would have in that race. Or maybe it's a flat race, so you do more flat intervals to try and prepare for those specific events. And then as far as how much intervals I could do, I learned early on that by doing too many intervals, right, you want to push yourself too hard. Maybe you go out and you say, I'm going to do 5 hill repeats today. But you do 4, and the 4th one, you're just ragged, your heart rate is up, you can't turn the same gear over. And I learned early on that by going ahead and doing that 5th one and just beating yourself up, you're not benefiting from it so much. You're tearing yourself down too much, and it's too hard to recover from.
Yeah.
So I've learned from my feel in the intervals to keep them quality, and they're easier to recover from, and you can, recover within a few days and get back to doing more quality intervals.
Yeah.
And these days, as I'm older, I pay a lot of attention to that. I don't beat myself up or tear myself down, because for sure it takes a lot longer to recover.
Yeah. So let's say I'm talking to the 72-year-old Ned. What do you think his kind of training or just fitness regimen will look like?
I think it will need even more discipline, because whether things like quality of sleep, quality of nutrition, probably don't drink so much beer.
You have some good beer there. That's hard to do.
Yeah, we've got 8 breweries in a town of 20,000 people, and every brewery seems to be thriving here. Right. So, but I'll have to use more discipline, and I'll have to be more careful of injury, especially. We've just talked about intensity and things of that nature, but the other thing that is really important is small little muscle strains and pulls. And as you get older, you're less flexible. You're much more prone to injury. And one of the things, when I was 35, if I had a stiff knee or a tight hamstring, you could ride through it. You could finish your workout. These days, if I get a muscle pull or a strain, then I will back off my training. I'll do more stretching, more massage, and try and get rid of it before it becomes a real problem. And it forces me to take time off from training, because kind of doing well and building your performance is all about momentum in training. And those little injuries, they stop the momentum. So if you can, try and figure out how to either not get those injuries to begin with, or get rid of them before they become a bigger problem, then you can maintain better momentum in your training. So I'll just have to be careful about all of that, and probably do more maintenance stuff, working on core issues and flexibility as I get older.
Yeah. And I hope listeners, you're hearing a lot of principles that, apply to our patients as well. So just some of the same things that are benefiting a high level athlete like Ned are still applicable to, maybe the 88-year-old woman that's having a tough time getting off her toilet, and you're working with her, in the skilled nursing facility, for example. We're all humans, and a lot of these principles are just human principles, not just, special to Ned. So I think that's something important for us to grasp, just the clinicians that are listening. I'm wondering what, we've talked about kind of the physical training and just kind of the changes that you've noticed. What changes have you observed throughout your career from the mental side of things, in terms of, maybe how you perceive things or what you think about, or different practices you may have?
Well, you have to accept that you have limitations. And I think that's a really important part of it too, right? You can't just say, well, I'm going to ignore the fact that I'm getting older, so that I can still perform at a high level. I know I'm still capable of good performances. And these I proved to myself through Strava times. And Strava has been a great tool, and I'm not sure if your listeners all understand what Strava is, but it's
give them an intro to it.
Well, Strava, it's I suppose it's a bit of a social media site, but when you start out on a ride, you record it either on your phone or, I use a Garmin computer. It has a GPS, and it compares your time to every time that you've previously ridden that ride, and to everybody else that's ridden a ride. So it's on a website. After your ride, you download it, you go to that website, and I can show that on this specific 1 mile hill, what the time was I did today compared to the last, I've been on Strava for like 6 years now. So every other time I've ridden up that hill. So it's fascinating. It can really show you, either your decline or the fact that even though you didn't feel very good on that ride today, that in fact you actually rode a pretty fast time.
Yeah.
So
and I think the cool thing too is that I can see what you're doing, in terms of the rides, if I, follow you, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So other people, you can make it private. My Strava is public, and it actually, because it's social media, Specialized, my employer, I work for Specialized Bicycles. They want me to be on Strava because, it's a social interaction thing. So I have, I think, almost 4,000 followers on Strava who follow my rides, and, and because I ride different Specialized bikes for, whether mountain bike, road bike, cyclocross bike, gravel bike, and stuff like that. So it kind of helps promote my employer as well.
Right. I've got some friends that will mimic their training based on your Strava profile. So you're doing a service to lots of people as you're gathering your own data to inform your training.
Well, it's interesting. I see the Strava profiles of the guys I'm riding against, that, or with, say, on these group rides. There's a bunch of pros, and I'll see, that like 2 days before, we do this intense competitive ride. They've ridden 90 miles with 12,000 feet of climbing or something incredible. And I look at that and I'm like, wow, that's impressive, because there's no way that, I would be, doing an intense competitive ride the day or even 2 days after that.
Yeah.
So it's a reminder that, of how well these guys recover. And that kind of reminds me of, how I was riding 20 years ago, but still capable of putting in a good performance, just, focusing more on how I need to train to do it.
Yeah. This is a really interesting question. I'm interested to hear your answer. Kathy Shirley, she is a physical therapist down at Texas Women's University. She teaches there. And she was curious to know if you've seen any advantages to aging in your particular sport.
I think, the main advantage I have is just knowledge and experience that I've gained over, having trained and raced for so long. I can't say that necessarily, well, at 62, I'm not gaining any physical advantages. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah.
but I think, now it's different as you get into your 30s and 40s. They say that your endurance can improve, and maybe your peak endurance age might be, 35 to 40 or something like that. And obviously it's different for all people. Mm-hmm. But at my age, I wouldn't say physical advantages, but for sure I've learned a lot over the years, and I try and apply that to, not just training, which is important, but also tactics of pacing. Mm-hmm. And, if it's a group ride and you see a couple of guys, shoot off the front, you can evaluate whether I think, those guys are going to come back, or whether I need to be in that move with them, because those guys are strong enough that, we're not going to catch them if we let them go. So, there's so many complexities to both mountain bike, road racing, different situations. So I've definitely benefited from all the experience I've had in those situations.
Yeah, I think like this year at the Iron Horse, with that perfect weather, I was thinking about you riding and just what this course is like from your perspective, just having done it so times, being in the area, knowing exactly where that turn is, going up to Coal Bank or, going up to Mullis or whatever, and just how just a master of efficiency that you must be, of knowing, when to go, when to slow down, and just conserving as much energy as possible. And nothing is wasted on that ride for you, I imagine, which, from the physical therapist standpoint, that's a piece of art. Just to be able to do something like that at such a high level is pretty neat to think about.
Yeah. It's one of the things that continues to motivate me to race at that level, is that, or to race at all, is the complexities of, there's so many different times. You've got the pack dynamics, which is different every time. Mm-hmm. You're trying to read different riders. You're trying to pace yourself, and to get to a certain point, say there's a climb at the end of the 10-mile fairly flat straightaway. Mm-hmm. And, that's Shalona Hill. And going up Shalona Hill, it was going so fast, you start telling yourself mentally, okay, I'm not going to be able to hold on to this pace. Yeah. I'm working too hard at this time, and I'm going to get dropped early. And evidently that's, I just did not have the fitness this year to be riding at this pace. And eventually it lets up, and you're still on, right? You right. Hang on to this group of, maybe there's 10 or 12 guys left at that point, and then you recover. And that's one thing I've learned, that if you can dig deep early in the race, I will feel better later in the race. I may be about to get dropped by 15 guys, half an hour into the race. But if I go an hour and a half into the race, then there's only 5 guys left, and I'm feeling much better.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
I know that, you can dig deep and there'll be some recovery, and the longer it goes, maybe the better I feel. And maybe that's relative to aging, that I've got a little better endurance after all this time.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit and just, just pick your brain about some of the, I guess, healthcare or professionals that you've worked with over the years. You mentioned, trying to be proactive, if you're feeling an ache or pain, or, wanting to make sure that you want to prevent whatever injury it may be. What are, let's say, 2 or 3 qualities that you look for in a healthcare provider, based on your experience with good or bad, PTs or strength coaches or whoever it may be? What are 2 or 3 qualities that you really value in a healthcare provider that you may work with?
The first thing that comes to mind is a healthcare provider with an open mind, and whether that's a doctor or a physical therapist, because I think athletes are different, and that if you go into your regular doctor, and you have a heart rate of 43, then they're going to say, well, we got,
right,
the heart rate's too slow. You may need some medication to get your heart rate up. So they've got to understand that, athletes can be different. So different, people have different needs, and that athletes are different. They'll have maybe different, metabolisms and different, blood values and stuff like that. So they need to take that, I think, into account. And, yes, especially with physical therapy, I think different modalities, and there's always, you guys are always constantly undergoing training, right? For new modalities and new ways to solve problems. One area that Specialized has worked with is that we hire doctors to help work on our products, and the products, which are especially 3 areas. We call them the touch points on the bike. One is hands, your feet, and then your butt on the saddle. So we've hired, urologists and hand doctors and podiatrists to help us work with, these touch points on the saddle. So it's been interesting working with these people to see how they, have done different studies, whether it's a pressure sensitive pad on the saddle or blood flow. The urologist, it worked on blood flow. The same thing with blood flow in your hands when you're in a cycling position. And and I've seen the technology change with these new tools they have for measuring things. So I think healthcare people that tap into the latest technology is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of certifications too for like bike fitting, for example. If someone wants to work with, with cyclists. But yeah, that's one thing I do love about our, requirements to practice is we, have to keep up on current kind of evidence-based physical therapy, which, we do have the liberty to choose whatever we want to choose in terms of courses. Some are better than others. But yeah, that's helpful to think about. So can you tell us about a terrible experience that you had with a healthcare provider, whether it was a physical therapist or someone else?
It's interesting. I would say there's chiropractic, and I think there's chiropractors that work more on the scientific side, and then I've encountered chiropractors that work maybe more on the voodoo side.
Yeah.
So I've had, and it's amazing how, I've had some chiropractors who are bike racers who, and even some physical therapists that will work with certain chiropractors and do some, chiropractic type manipulations. But I've also been to chiropractors that, literally will, hold a tincture or a vial of something over your chest while they do a kinesiology strength test, and then hold something different over your chest in a hand and do a different test. And these are well-respected chiropractors in this town. And when they start doing tests like that, then that's the last time, I'll be going to that specific chiropractor. I need a little more science-based evidence on that.
That's funny. And it's all too common. It's common in that profession, but it's even common, in our profession as well, in the PT world. I think that's one of our big weaknesses, is the variability in the theories and thoughts behind why we do certain things that we do. And our education is relatively standardized. We have to meet certain requirements and teach certain things, and we all take a test. But once we get out of that school, there's so many directions that we can go to get, continuing education. And, the result of that is, you may go to, like you said, a chiropractor or PT that is very evidence-based, objective, and kind of more in that realm. And then you could go, across the street and have someone pull out their crystals and whatever, other thing that's the modality of the day, which, is definitely, an issue that we always struggle with. So,
I'd say another area which I think should maybe be emphasized more, and not to generalize about physical therapists or doctors, but I tend to have overuse injuries primarily. Sometimes I'll crash on my mountain bike and strain my back and stuff like that. But, like a lot of cyclists, I have very tight hips, you're got a lot of bent over posture. So my upper back will be tight. Your low back, you get tweaked from being in this specific position for so long. And I think one of the most effective things is massage, from a good massage therapist. And what I find is that, if I go to a doctor about back pain, they're very reluctant to prescribe massage. They'll prescribe, physical therapy, but I think they know massage can be very effective. But for some reason, and I've even had, an orthopedic guy tell me, well, everybody wants massage, So I think whether the healthcare insurance, doesn't like to pay for massage, but I think they would if doctors would prescribe it more. I think that massage therapy is not prescribed enough, and then paid for by health insurance, because it can be quite expensive.
Yeah, and some, it really depends too on what PT that you go to. You may go to one that is going to try and do particular movements or exercises that you will perform to try and lower your symptoms, and then other people that'll they may do an hour of hands-on work. So the variability is pretty tremendous. So, well,
I find that to be important. And one other thing I'll mention about massage therapy. I was just talking about it with my wife, because she had meniscus surgery, so she's been going regularly to her physical therapist. I've been to physical therapists where they give me a list of exercises, strengthening and flexibility exercises to perform. And I don't always have the discipline to do them, if you know what I mean. I'm sure you see a lot of that, right? I think that's why it's so important to actually get in there on a regular basis. And I have much better success treating the injuries that I've had when I go to physical therapy regularly, like twice a week, and they're actually making me perform those exercises and reinforcing that I need to do it on my own at home. So not sure where I'm going with that, but just my lack of discipline. And I'm been a professional athlete,
right,
and I still don't have the discipline to follow up.
And that's saying something, and it's helpful for me to hear and everyone listening to hear from, kind of the patient perspective. And when someone like Deadly Nedley says that, I mean, we should really listen, because in all honesty, the overwhelming majority of our patients don't do what we necessarily recommend. And I think we're starting to talk more about how we haven't really helped ourselves by, just giving people kind of generic sheets of paper with, 9 to 12 exercises and expecting them to do that 2 to 3 times a day. That's A, that may not even be effective, and B, that's just not realistic for hardly anyone. So there is more discussion on how can we be more tactful and thoughtful in making recommendations, and maybe instead of giving the sheet of 9 to 12 exercise, maybe just picking a couple ones that are really going to be effective for those deficits, and talking too about getting into the science behind habit formation. Just some of the different things that we can do to break bad habits, but then build good habits. And so there's all kinds of different tactics that we're starting to use. But I'd say, the norm is definitely just handing out the generic sheet and expecting someone to, do 10 exercises, 20 reps 3 times a day, which I don't know many people that are actually going to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about how many, because I've had, several of those sheets. I'll go home and put it in a folder. I've got so many, exercises to do. And it'd be a lot simpler if it was just like the 3 main ones I could be focusing on at home. Maybe I'll do more when I'm actually at the physical therapist, but it's the ones at home have to be pretty simple to do it, and figuring out the time to do it, like do it at this specific time of day, right before dinner or something. So you get in the habit of when you're doing it.
Right. Yeah. That's such a big deal. Such a big deal. Well, Ned, I really appreciate your time just to get on the horn with me, and for, on behalf of, just kind of the Senior Rehab Project audience, it's just really helpful to hear people like you share your story, share your experience, your training, your injuries, how you recover. Because even though you're this very, very high level athlete, there are lots of principles that I can go tomorrow to that assisted living facility where I'm going to spend all day and apply some of those principles to those patients. So just thank you for taking the time to do that, and just continuing to really break stereotypes and defy all the odds and get people thinking differently about aging, which is something that we're definitely trying to do around here as well. So keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's been good talking to you. And I think you made the analogy of comparing me to a basketball player early on. I mean, that's one of the beauties of cycling, because there's less injury because of I don't know, dynamic movements or something, but it's not weight bearing and stuff. So it's something that you can do, and that it can help older people stay fit for a long period of time. Just have to be careful not to fall off.
Right. Definitely. That's awesome. So Ned, I'm going to put a couple links in the show notes to your Facebook page. Any other links that you'd want people to go check out if they're more interested in just kind of what you're up to, your career, anything else you'd want them to visit?
Well, boomerang.com has, it's got like my palmaris, so kind of a history of my racing. So that's kind of an interesting.
Okay. And folks, that's BOURE.com, and there'll be a link in the show notes. And what else?
And maybe the Strava. It's free to join Strava, but you can follow people, and it's fascinating to see the different rides that different people do. I love Strava because if I'm going to a town that I've never been to, I can follow somebody, tap into that town or the trails or the rides in that area. And so it's a great kind of travel log to figure out where to ride or explore. And it's not just cycling, it can be running and hiking and a variety of different things. So my link on Strava would be good too, I think.
I'll do that. I think you've talked me into joining Strava. My good friends, they're here in Lexington now, but they did live in Durango. They're the ones that really got me to go out there to do the Iron Horse the first time, like 7 or 8 years ago. But they're always saying, Dustin, get on Strava, get on Strava. And I'm more like you, where I definitely try and be intuitive, and I'm not necessarily training hard. I'm not trying to be competitive or anything, but I just kind of get out to just kind of unplug and disconnect. So I never have a phone. I don't have a smart watch or anything like that. But now just hearing how you leverage it, especially when you go into new towns, I need to jump on that. So, all right.
Yeah,
so,
Strava is a great resource, and it's free. So that's hard to beat.
So Strava, Ned's profile will be in the show notes. Boure, BOURE.com will be there as well. And Ned, if I know Iron Horse Weekend's absolutely crazy, but I'm going to shoot you an email and see if you want to get a beer at one of the 8 breweries, that crazy weekend. Or, if you do the mountain bike race, I can hand you a beer as you're riding through Steamworks. How about that?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, ping me before you're here next year, and we'll have a coffee or a beer or something.
Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. If you only listen to these podcast episodes, you are missing out on 90% of the Senior Rehab Project. Hop on over to seniorrehabproject.com, where you can join the movement that's advancing care for older adults. You can join for free or become a part of the Game Changers, where you can get some free gear and access to our monthly meetup. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com. I appreciate y'all, and I'll talk with you soon. But in the meantime, do not forget to stay funky.